All right, we've got our UX all set up, the XAML's all ready. Let's implement some code to go get those tweets from Twitter. So we'll come down here and start out with the code that we need. You might notice that we also already added the About box and the About box calling menu item to the main page XAML so that we don't have to do that at the end. And now we'll bring in the real code here, and we'll add another class in order to store our tweets. So add class, and it's called tweet. It looks like this, just has 3 strings, name of the Twitter handle, contents, and statuses. We use that to feed our list box. And now let's go take a look at the code behind where we actually go get the tweets. We've got a phone application page as always. We're using our settings class that we used back in our units converter sample application so that we can keep track of the Twitter handle that we're getting status for. This is in anticipation of implementing the tombstoning support we're going to do later on in this chapter. So we set it up to be the blank string. When we actually get a string from the user, we store it into there, which then gets stored into isolated storage, if you recall, from the units converter. The only kind of HTTP web access available to developers in Windows Phone is asynchronous. You can't do HTTP client and do synchronous web access. So the way we do this is we instantiate an instance of the WebClient class. We set the download string completed handler to a new method of ours called connect Twitter download string completed. And then we call download string async on the web client instance. And in this case, we pass api.twitter.com/1/statuses/user_timeline.xml ? Screen name, and then we put the screen name or the user handle that we got from the text box. One thing to note, if you're working with this app or you're working with building your own Twitter clients, Twitter has 2 kinds of APIs. It has the free public REST API, which is what we're using in this app, and that has a restriction of 150 API calls per hour. As we were developing this app for this course, we ran into that a few times and had to wait an hour before we could continue to access Twitter. If you're going to be creating an actual Twitter application, you're going to want to use the OAuth API, and that has a limit of 350 API calls per hour. So unless your user is sitting there tapping on the screen wanting to update the Twitter status, that should be more than enough. But if you start to try to access Twitter and you get back 400 errors, it pretty much means you run into that Twitter API throttling limit, and you should wait an hour before you continue on working on your app. Now, once we've made the request to Twitter, when that request is satisfied and the web client completes, we get called back here to download string completed. If you did run into that 400 error, you would end up in here, and when you look at the e.error, it's pretty clear what's happening. So let's assume that we got valid data, so we use the built-in system.xml.link facilities to parse out the XML, looking at the status collection and getting the user statuses count and the text and the screen name for each of the tweets. We don't do anything with it yet, but let's go ahead and run this just so that we can see that we're going to get the tweets. And because we're putting them into this item source, we'll actually be able to see the data binding work, and the tweets will show up in the list box. We'll come up here and put our Twitter handle in again, click update, and there's our tweets. We don't have anything handling them yet, so as we click on them, nothing happens right now. And that's what we're going to get to as we carry on with this. Next up, we're going to go and look and make sure that we can know when we're actually connected to the network so that we know how to handle errors, and when the application starts, we can tell people what's really going on.